Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks, and this is my Magicka Nightblade DPS guide. Magblade is a really strong option in GREYMOOR, especially for single target DPS, and is one of the best classes to take advantage of the new Vampire skill line as well. In this video, I'll be going over the top races for Magblade, the Mundus Stone, food and potions, vampirism, gear options, skill bar options, champion points, 2 rotations, one easier static rotation and one advanced rotation, and then finally we'll end the video with the Parse from Rosskag on the 21 million trial dummy. I want to give a big thanks to Rosskag for sending me a bunch of tips on Magblade while I was figuring things out, and for offering to allow me to use a clip of his Parse on the trial dummy. I'll put a link to his YouTube in the description below. One more thing, I also wanted to let you all know that recently I've started streaming pretty regularly over at Twitch. It's been a ton of fun hanging out with you guys, and this is my tentative schedule over there for right now. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. For the race, the best option for damage is High Elf, followed very closely by Dark Elf, and then Khajiit. I'll put Breton as a wild card, and a solid choice for newer players whose groups might not be optimized for sustain, since that cost reduction can end up putting them a lot closer to Altmer in some scenarios. Plus, the extra spell resistance can be pretty nice too. For veteran players, I definitely recommend High Elf though, due to the extra spell damage. Dark Elf is really close though, only 125 Magicka behind, and overall Dark Elf is probably less than 0.5% DPS behind High Elf, plus you do have the added benefit of being able to play stamina just as well as Magicka. For the Mundus Stone, we're going with the Shadow. For our food, we're using Artaeum Pickled Fishbowl. You can also do the standard blue bi-stat food if the purple food is a little too expensive. The stats on the blue food are just a tiny bit worse. If you're really having trouble with sustain, you can use Clockwork Citrus. This is a little bit more expensive and has a little bit better stats than Witch Mother's Potent Brew. I do recommend trying to use some sustain skills or working with your group to find out how you can better optimize for sustain before switching over to this option. For the potions, we're using Spell Power plus Spell Crit plus Magicka. For Vampirism, in the GREYMOOR patch, the Vampire skills got a big rework. The Vampire skill line now has the strongest Magicka melee spammable ability in Eviscerate. One morph of this skill, Blood for Blood, costs health instead of Magicka to cast, so it is a huge boost to your sustain. Just make sure you only run this if you have a healer in your group, and also if you can be in a melee spot. Also, it's probably not advisable to use it in extremely high incoming damage spots, such as the Portal team in Cloud Rest or Sunspire. Another ability from the Vamp line that is interesting is the Blood Frenzy ability. This ability, used in combination with Swallow Soul, should be able to be left toggled on for a short duration without the health drain becoming too intense. This skill is not on a global cooldown, meaning that you can use it in the same 1 second period that another skill is used. This means you could toggle it on and off for burst windows without actually changing your rotation at all. It may be a bit tedious to get down, but once mastered could be a really strong tool for an additional damage boost. Similarly to Blood for Blood, it is not advised to use this in situations where there is a lot of unavoidable incoming damage. You also don't have to be a vampire. The gear setups and rotation options provided will work for your standard abilities as well. And being a vampire does have some disadvantages, even at the lowest stage, including an increase to the cost of all of your non-vampire abilities. So if you aren't going to be using the abilities much, probably best just to avoid it altogether. Now I'll go over the gear. The first setup we'll go over is the one with the highest overall damage potential, and this will be a 2-piece Zon, 5-piece Mother's Sorrow, 5-piece Sororia, and a Maelstrom Inferno Staff. So for the Zon, you want 1 heavy and 1 medium. It doesn't matter if it's your head or shoulders that are heavy or medium. You'll want those both divines with max Magicka enchants. Another option is Maw of the Infernal. It is about the same damage as Zon, it seems, and is probably usable in a few more situations, but get ready to piss your tanks off. Another monster set option that should be really good in places that Zon is not usable is Domi House, but only if the boss you're fighting has a big hitbox. So in particular, the dragons in Sunspire, this should be a really strong option there. And finally, Narayanth is also a pretty decent option if you are using Force Pulse. Since Narayanth procs off direct damage and Force Pulse is 3 instances of direct damage, it helps to keep it up a little bit better. Just a few quick notes about the gear. The jewelry pieces and the body pieces are all interchangeable, so if you have Mother Sorrow jewels and a few Sororia body pieces, that's totally fine. You can also run a Mother Sorrow staff on the front bar instead of the Sororia staff, but this will be a little bit of a DPS loss. This is because the Mother Sorrow bonus is static, while the Sororia bonus is coming from the circle that you're standing in, and so it carries over to your back bar. Overall, it's really not a huge deal if you have a Mother Sorrow staff there, but I did want to note that the Sororia staff is optimal. For the body pieces, we'll also have all Divines with max Magicka enchants, and then for the jewelry, we'll have all Bloodthirsty with spell damage enchants. For our front bar, we'll go Precise with the Flame enchant, and on the back bar, Infused with the weapon damage enchant. For situations where Sororia is not usable, that will lead us right into this setup. Our monster set options will be exactly the same as before, and then we'll run a 5-piece False Gods, Perfected if you have it, and 5-piece Mother Sorrow, and a Maelstrom Inferno staff. Just like our last setup, the jewelry and the body pieces are interchangeable, so if you have False Gods jewels you want to use, go for it. Another option here, if you are having absolutely no sustain issues, you can run a False Gods Inferno staff on the front bar instead of the Mother Sorrow staff. This would technically be just a tiny bit more DPS, but the difference is so small that most people prefer to have the False Gods cost reduction also apply to their expensive back bar abilities. For the gear traits and the enchants, we'll do exactly the same as the first setup. And for those that have yet to pick up any trial gear, you can also use New Moon Acolyte or Julianos in place of False Gods. They're both craftable. New Moon should be a little bit more damage, but is a little bit harder to sustain. And finally, if you're confused about where to get any of these sets, I definitely recommend checking out ESOsets.com. I'll put the link in the description below. Now we'll go over the skills. On the front bar, we'll be running Mystic Orb, Impale, Crippling Grasp, our spammable, so either Elemental Weapon, Blood for Blood, Force Pulse, or Swallow Soul, and then Merciless Resolve. For our ultimate, we'll use Incap if we need more sustain, or Soul Harvest if we don't. For the back bar, we'll use Siphoning Attacks, Unstable Wall, Twisting Path, Dark Shade, Barbed Trap or Channeled Acceleration for minor force, and then also Incap or Soul Harvest, or also Fiery Rage is an option if you need some more AoE damage. The reason we sometimes use Incapacitating Strike over Soul Harvest, even though it is a stamina morph, is because it only does a tiny bit less damage than Soul Harvest because ultimates scale off of your highest resource, and it adds the additional effect of returning 100 stamina with each light or heavy attack. If sustain is not an issue for you, go ahead and go with Soul Harvest though. One thing to keep in mind when setting up your bars is the Magicka Flood passive, which increases your max Magicka by 8% while a siphoning ability is slotted. We have this passive taken care of with the Crippling Grasp ability on our front bar and siphoning attacks on our back bar. If you happen to be using Swallow Soul for your spammable, this also takes care of that passive, so you could actually drop Crippling Grasp to simplify your rotation a little bit. This would allow you to run something like Inner Light on your front bar and get a little more damage for your spammables, for your Impale, and your Merciless Resolve. This is also a way that you could slot Simmering Frenzy and toggle it on right before your spammable and bow proc phase, and then toggle it right back off again without affecting your rotation. And one last thing, if you do need to run a shield, you can drop Dark Shade off your back bar. It does do a lot of damage on the trial dummy and fights where you don't move a lot, but it is a little more inconsistent than other abilities and is usually the first to go if you need a shield. If you're confused about any of these skills or what base ability you need to morph these from, I highly recommend checking out ESOskillbook.com. I'll put the link in the description below. And finally, if you're running a little low on skill points and only want to take the passives that are absolutely necessary, I'll put a guide to those in the description below. I also plan on putting out a beginner's guide to Nightblade that goes through all of the passives and the uniqueness of the class. Now I'll go over the champion points. In the Apprentice, we're doing 64 in Elemental Expert, 61 Elfborn, 10 Spell Erosion. In the Atronach, we're doing 72 Master at Arms, 35 Staff Expert, and then in the Ritual, we're doing 28 in Thaumaturge. For this tree, just keep an eye on your penetration levels and make sure you're reaching the cap of 18,200. If you're not, go ahead and move some of those points out of Staff Expert into Spell Erosion. For example, if you don't have Taurugs in the group and you just have a regular infused Crusher enchant, you'll want 17 points into Spell Erosion instead of 10. For the red and the green trees, I just put generic setups here, but these will vary greatly depending on your personal preferences and also on what content you're running, so make sure to adjust those accordingly. If you're interested in the recommended CP for each trial, I do recommend joining the ESO University Discord. It is run by Nephis, and I'll put a link to that in the description below as well. Now we'll go over the rotations. Start off with the more simple static rotation. With this particular setup, I got 88k on the trial dummy. We'll start by pre-buffing siphoning attacks and merciless resolve, and then we'll drop our trap and cast orb. If you're using channeled acceleration instead of trap, pre-buff it here and keep it up whenever it runs out. You'll replace trap's spot in the rotation with an extra spammable. And then if you're on PC, you can also pre-buff with channeled acceleration and then swap that to barbed trap with an add-on like dressing room or alpha gear. From here out, the rotation is unstable wall, twisting path, dark shade, bar swap, merciless resolve, crippling grasp, 3 spammables, merciless resolve, orb, bar swap, and then you repeat the same exact rotation except you're going to alternate trap and shade every other rotation. Then you'll use your ultimate whenever it's ready, but make sure not to apply it right before you reapply your dots. You'll want to apply it while your dots are running and then while you're doing nothing but spammables and bow procs. Once we get into execute, we're only going to be keeping up unstable wall, twisting path, our shade, and trap, and then we swap in impale in place of our spammable. The bow proc from Merciless Resolve does slightly more damage than impale, so you'll want to keep casting it when it's ready, but it isn't enough damage over impale to warrant recasting the buff once it's run out. It's really hardly any damage difference, so you can just ignore Merciless Resolve and spam impale if you want. And then a couple of extra notes: if you can get every tick of orb off on the target that you're fighting, it is still worth keeping up and execute. And then for your shade, only recast it if you're going to get more than 14 seconds out of it. If there's less than that left in the fight, then don't recast it. And then finally, for bar setups that are not using crippling grasp, just add in 1 extra spammable in place of it. Now I'll quickly go over the advanced rotation. This is what Rosskag used to get the 91k parse. For the pre-buff, we'll use siphoning attacks, merciless resolve, barbed trap, and the same thing applies with barbed trap versus channeled acceleration as with the previous rotation. Then we'll open up with shade, unstable wall, twisting path, bar swap, crippling grasp, orb, incap or soul harvest, and then merciless resolve, and then 4 spammables and another merciless resolve. From this point forward, the rotation is kept up dynamically, and you'll just refresh your dots as they're running out. You can pair orb and unstable wall together since they're both on 10-second timers, and then everything else is handled the same way as explained in the previous rotation. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. That's going to be the end of this guide. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or stop by and check out my Twitch stream. I'm happy to answer your questions there as well. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.
Everybody do the G. 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 Yeah, I feel my heartbeat racing. I'm pacing back and forth, trying not to face it. I'm chasing the facts. I just can't relax, cause my mind's on the fast stacks. I'm talking cash. Yeah, I know there's more to this life than the money, but it's funny how the paper make a rainy day sunny and dry it all up like the nose it ain't runny. Been a while since I was 20 and was acting like a dummy. Always had this vision I would be in the neon. It turned me on, so I turned the beat on, and I decided to keep it cool like free on. Now you see my face when you turn the TV on. I'm so special, call me special ed. My life is an adventure like Bill and Ted. So get out your bed, lift up your head, open up your eyes. I'm coming like a sunrise. I got one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the steering wheel. I got one hand on the steering wheel, one hand heartbeat racing. Man, I feel my forehead filling up with sweat. And I bet if I took a second glance, wouldn't leave it up to chance to go get a romance. Married to my music, I hope I never lose it. Give me time and sound to show you how to use it. To crawl up in your minds and open up the blinds. Let the light shine in upon a million lives. Yeah, it's crazy how some people still act. No tag, treating all of their opinions like facts. Just relax, sit back, don't worry about the drama. I love my mama, I want change like Obama. Yeah, I'm a bit strange.